righty, let's do this in three, two, and one. Well, we welcome you to another episode of the Days to Happy podcast. And it is my pleasure to have Jeff Perry on with us today. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
I'm really excited about this. We were just talking a little bit before, and I got even more excited about digging into what makes us different and unique and having a fun conversation here, Maurice. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And what I've got to say is Jeff is a partner over at Higher Aligned. And if any of you want to learn a little bit about that, you've got to go study it out. They're doing good things out there in the world for people and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And that's basically how we got together as one of the people that he works with there. But the other thing though too is just been around as a consultant, as a facilitator, and we've seen all kinds of things in those different capacities in the workplace, in the personal life, and so on and so forth. And just so that you know, we're not therapists. We're two gentlemen over here having a conversation. And from days to happy, that's exactly what we're trying to do is how do we get to that spot of happiness? I know it sounds kumbaya, but that's what we're here for. But Jeff, anyway, I'm tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you there and all the different things that you experienced, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where to start, but I'd say like the things that are core to me is I'm a husband and father. We've got four beautiful kids, two girls, two boys, and so raising a young family creates a lot of opportunities for learning and growth on my side, that's for sure. Especially those times when your kids use the very things you've been trying to teach them on you, and it's a very humbling experience. That happens plenty. On the professional side, I care deeply about helping unlock potential in people, help them be their best self, whether that's an individual that I'm coaching with or we're talking about teams or organizations. And and one of the a couple keywords for me, one is intentionality.
Mhm.
So over the last few years, especially I've leaned into that word, written a couple books, The Intentional Engineer in particular, because I specialized a lot of my coaching work and practice on engineers and technology professionals. And then wrote another book called The Intentional Guide to Professional Networking, trying to help people be more intentional about how they connect and build relationships in the professional environment. But all that has been mostly focused on the individual. Do some speaking and facilitation out there too, but connected with some of my friends at Higher Line, like we talked about earlier. And the first time I heard what they were up to try and help people find work that was meaningful by improving how companies and candidates find alignment of purpose and values. That spoke to me really quickly, and I very quickly said, "Hey, how can I be involved?" And so I'm talking about that. And for about 2.5, 3 months, I've been involved more deeply. So really excited about what we're building there.
Man, I'm going to jump right into that because when I've worked with organizations, a lot of times the biggest example of duress that I've seen is they don't feel that they have a purpose here. They
Yeah.
don't feel that their values align, and there are those circumstances where it's led to them not only being unhappy but completely miserable. And I think that's a very interesting take when you have an organization that is taking a very deliberate approach of that. Would you mind explaining what that looks like? I don't want to have you give away any secret sauce, but yeah.
Absolutely. Can I take just a quick break? I've got some kiddos that are
Yes,
supposed to be upstairs instead of
please,
the other room, and I imagine there's some background noise. So I'm going to try
please
and avert
do.
that.
Go ahead, go ahead. That was funny.
Okay, that's going to be better. All right. We'll take a clean break that hopefully we can very easily edit out.
Yep, that's it. So what we do.
Absolutely, Maurice. So when we think about what we're trying to do, I already mentioned like we're trying to improve this concept of alignment. We believe that when individuals, new hires are aligned with the culture and values of the team and the organization that they work with, magic happens.
Mhm.
So we're talking like improve engagement, retention, and productivity. They'll all skyrocket. And and that also leads to the people, all the people on the team, and certainly these new hires are going to be happier and more fulfilled because they're living and working in more alignment with the things that they care about, right? Also, on the company side, we believe that it's going to save time, money, and stress when you hire the right people because it's expensive and frustrating and not good for anyone when you hire people who aren't aligned. But when you do that and create the right fit from the start, good things happen. So, how we do that is a few different things. So, we've got some AI-driven assessments where we do a culture benchmark of the team, where they let us know what their core values are and a few other things about who they are and how they want to operate. And then we do an assessment of them that gets them to just tell us stories. This is a conversational assessment. Tell us stories about how they do those things, which gives us a good sense of, okay, they say these are their core values. How are they actually doing on that according to what they tell us, right? And so instead of saying, hey, this is your aspirational culture, we get a sense of this is what your actual culture is across the team. Then, when people are applying to potentially work at the company, they're potential candidates, all of these potential candidates who are applying also take their own conversational assessment that we hear stories. It's kind of like an AI-driven interview, if you will. It only takes 20, 30 minutes, but we are able to then extract their likely culture fit according to the actual culture of the company, and
Mhm.
then give them a fit score, essentially. So, what we found is some pretty cool things. First of all, whether or not the person gets chosen to work for the company, they get a report that says, hey, this is what you, based on what you told us, here's some interesting information about you, why you may or may not be a fit for this particular company, and some things that you might want to be looking for, right? So, it's a career clarity tool for them to give them some positive feedback, which, by the way, very rarely do people get great feedback, if any feedback, during the hiring process. And then for them and the organization, it's trying when someone does get chosen, there's this a little bit of this like, yeah, like, hey, the tool said this could make it work. Like then they have this positive immediate impression where everyone's trying to make that work, which immediately puts a positive spin on the onboarding and the hiring process for everyone there. And then there are people who are generally going to stick around longer and save a bunch of money and reduces attrition issues and all sorts of stuff. So that's a real quick overview of what we're trying to do.
I like that. And thanks for giving that because it's good to understand what you're working with. And on top of that, what you're doing for people. I do enjoy the fact that you're giving them feedback because sometimes when you're going through that job process, you're a number. You're taking away that wonder, which is quite frankly very damaging sometimes. Just thinking,
Right.
what did I miss? What did I miss? Am I good enough?
Yeah.
And blah 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 blah.
Right.
Right?
And we aren't directly involved in or doing anything to make the decisions on the hiring.
Sure.
The company still owns that, right? We're just giving one extra layer of data for them to use
Yeah.
that can help them filter and we've seen on the time savings on the company side. In fact, we have one of our earliest clients, they just told us this week they've hired 189 people it was in the last 7 months
Wow.
with one talent acquisition person.
That's
Like
amazing.
crazy that they've been able to do that because of how much easier we've made it for them. In addition to like these people are sticking around a lot longer, like this is a pretty quick churn and fast growing sales team, and those teams can churn pretty quick,
Yeah.
and they've experienced much better retention with that too. So it's been a
Wow.
huge deal for them.
Well, I want to go to your own experience too. You've worked with engineers and then a lot of tech folk,
Yeah.
and then just from a coaching perspective, you're really visiting with a number of different people. When
Hmm.
you look at why even post hiring, there's still
Yeah.
those things that really get in the way of effectiveness and such. And
Mm,
what what have you seen that have been some of the, let's say, the patterns, not even the patterns, but just some of the commonalities that lead to that dissatisfaction, but even more so if they're dissatisfied and not doing anything about how do you get them to take action?
Right. So a few things that come to mind. I mean, there's kind of a scale of like dissatisfaction and what that leads to. There's been a lot over the last few years, like the quiet quitting uh, phenomenon, and even just in the last couple months, I see this new term of called quiet cracking, where these people aren't actively trying to shut everything off. They're still performing okay, but inside their fulfillment, where we're talking about happiness and mental health and stuff, like that's cracking. So that's an
Yes.
interesting thing. That's a new term that I just learned because I think it's just been recently coined. So that's kind of interesting too. You know what? And then in the corporate world, like we talk about the concept of engagement,
Hmm.
right? Gallup obviously does a bunch of studies on that. I would define engagement as people are engaged when two things happen, when they care about who they work with and what they work on. Okay. There's a connection with the people and the work is interesting and engaging to them, right? If it's only one, usually that's not there. I mean, I've experienced where like, hey, I love the people, but what I'm doing, like I'm just not feeling it. And I've felt the other way too, like, hey, I love what I'm doing, but like this particular team is not my jam, right? And I see that all the time with people. So some of that is sort of like this simmering, like, hey, this is not great. And so people get in the state of like, well, is there something more than this, right? That's very common. Certainly it can go much further than that in terms of dealing with harassment and severe leadership issues that lead to like, I mean, I've dealt with people, plenty of people who we would say there's legitimate workplace trauma that happens. It's not something that gets talked about a lot, right? And so people on the other side of those roles have to heal. And
Yes.
they go to therapy and they do other work and they find other people and support resources to rally around them. But there is a healing process that has to happen as a result of trauma that happened in a workplace setting. I
Wow.
would love for that not to happen, right?
Yes.
But it does. And some of that is cultures proliferate and we occasionally will companies will accept negative behavior
Yeah.
as long as the person is performing. What we don't realize is even if the individual is performing, what are the outside
Yeah.
influences on the people around them
You
that's
know,
actually dragging everyone else down? I see that happen a lot.
you brought up some important points there. Matter of fact, we started out as a not a disengagement, it's an employee engagement
Yeah.
entity, and we started to see that most of the reasons people weren't engaged were actually one of those two factors that you just brought up
Mhm.
there. But more importantly, looking at the data, I mean, from Gallup and from everyone, I had to see what the numbers were. So the reason my eyes went off is I had to go, okay, what's the percentage? Man,
Yeah.
it's crazy. 77% are experiencing work-related stress.
Yeah.
66% report burnout. This is just
Yeah,
in
burnout.
2025. And it's funny because we have that facade of performance and it's not telling us the deeper rooted issue. So once you've identified that that is an issue, what's your conversation like to the individual and maybe
Mm.
even the leadership?
Yeah. Well, like anything, I'm going to put on my engineer hat. And so engineers do things when we're trying to solve technical problems. We do a root cause analysis, right? We need to do the same thing with people.
Yep.
Like instead of like, hey, here's the surface issue, like it's about this particular relationship or this project went wrong or whatever. Like that's all just the stuff on the surface. We need to find ways to get to like what's really underneath that, right?
Yes. Yep.
What's the real turmoil and challenge that's going on.
Yeah.
And that's been a myriad of things I've found. And it's so personal and individual because every single one of us is different and the things we care about is different. So again, I use that lens of intentionality. Like what is it that you deeply care about, right?
Yes.
What are those core values that you want to be operating under? And sometimes it's a legit complete misalignment
Mhm.
of an individual's values and what how the company operates and their values, right? And that might be okay for some, and others that's not great, right? Others it's just like maybe just not good, right? But but a lot of people don't actually sit back and think about what are those things that I actually care about deeply, right? They just don't consider it that much. They don't
Yeah.
spend that time. And so getting that clarity around, where I want to go, and it's not like you have to have this perfect like 20, 30-year career plan with every step mapped out, but like can we get some of that like North Star idea? Like, can I have the direction? And use that as a filter for decisions and opportunities and maybe projects and other things to take on so that people can be more intentional instead of saying, hey, these are all the things I want to get away from and avoid. But it's actually a lot more powerful to have what's called an approach orientation rather than an avoidance orientation. Say, hey, these are the things that I want, which then informs us, okay, how do I go achieve that or get that and take ownership? Because there's all sorts of things in our companies and in the market and the world that we don't have influence over. But when we can take responsibility and ownership for what we can control, then we have a lot more power. I like to say, there's that famous quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, that can be flipped the other way too. With great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility, we are empowered to change ourselves and our circumstances and the things around us.
I love that answer. And I must admit, when I first heard you talking about the root cause analysis and stuff, I remember when I first, coming in from an HR perspective, I thought, daggum engineers, man, it's all about the data. And it's funny is the more that I worked in the field, I go, it is about the data. You go
Yeah.
five whys deep. You use a
Yes.
Ishikawa diagram. You go,
Yep.
you do the scientific method. And the
Hmm.
funny thing is, if you apply that to the human side of it, it's funny because the thing that I'd been fighting so long happened to be the very tool that helped me get down to the nitty-gritty of what it was all
Yeah.
about. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you sharing that. It really
Absolutely.
does.
Yeah, I use the five whys with people all the time, where
Yes.
we talk about, hey, something that's important to them, and we dig into, okay, why?
Yeah.
Why is that important to you? Why is that important? When they can go a few levels deep, we're not getting to just, hey, what's this surface level goal, but
Right.
like, what's that really about for them? And
Yes.
and they connect with instead of external, but intrinsic motivation, which is a lot more powerful.
Now, have you found too when you've used those things, and I know I have, but the five whys sometimes they get fed up. Like, why are you
Sure.
asking me that question again? And right, and then
Yeah.
then even further, go you're explaining it. You're feeling stress. And right now, quite regularly, you're making me feel stressed. We're trying to get
Mhm.
to that so you're not feeling that anymore. But anyway, that's my
Mhm.
approach. I'm interested in hearing how you deal with that.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, especially in a coaching and one-on-one scenario, it's just like holding space. And
Yes.
obviously we need to be in a space as kind of facilitator and coach to be as powerfully regulated as possible
Right.
for them. Because a lot of times I've seen uh, even in one session, people go through a whole roller coaster of emotions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
As they're kind of working through things. And that's great. Like a lot of times there are things that have been suppressed and like they're coming out and there's these things internal that are they're resisting because it's hard work to do,
Right.
right? But I would say like it's hard work, but it's work worth doing.
Hmm. I
And
mean,
so like and when they can connect with that, like, yeah, this is hard, but this is what I want because I can see the growth and the progress that can happen on the other side. Then they connect with the purpose behind it. It's a lot more powerful.
right. There was an interesting concept I read. I have a friend, and you probably know him too. I mean, it looks like we were connected with a lot of same people, but buddy of mine
Mhm.
named Richie Norton. He
Oh
has
yeah. Yeah,
Richie is
Richie, we call him Uncle Richie. Yeah.
Uncle Richie. So you know what I'm talking about when he's in one of his latest books there, how he talks about working from the goal instead of working
Yeah,
toward
yeah,
it,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And it's interesting because when we look at and this is I'm sorry about this going in the business side of it because it is about happy, but sometimes the people reason we're not happy is because we forget that it's about purely providing. Yes, we need to provide for family, or yes, we need to provide for
Mhm.
the substance of life and so on and so forth. But at what point does that get to we're not being true to what our own purpose is? And this is exactly why it is so important to really take consideration of that. And I've seen I've seen it for myself that the impact of bringing them to that. And since you know them as well, and putting a lot of those principles into play here too, it sounds
Mhm.
like what can you take us through what an individual actually starts to, oh man, the blinders are starting to fall here, man.
Mhm.
I start to see.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So let me just do that and tell in a particular story. I had one client. He was a very experienced engineer. We're talking over 20 years into his career, and he'd been in a lot of different places over the years. And he'd had some places that were great experience, and some that honestly like were kind of on that workplace trauma side. He felt like he'd been burned a lot of times. And so he was when we first met, he was about 8 or 9 months into a new role, and it wasn't going great at the time. And he thought like, hey, I probably need to move on already. Like this doesn't look good. But what he described to me that he really wanted, even before we really dove into coaching work, he said, I want to find my happy place in my career, right?
Oh,
And he's like, I don't know what that means exactly. It seems a little ethereal, but like that's what I want. I said, okay, let's go do it. So we dove in and he was very vulnerable and willing to go through this. And all the while, like we're talking about work, but like life happens too.
right.
Like his wife was dealing with some severe health issues and in the hospital, his kids were going through stuff. Like life still happens. And that weighs on us as well. But we did a lot of work around, I do a lot of mindset work with my clients around kind of the lenses that we see ourselves and other people as we go about doing things. And he had some realizations that he was in an extremely, at the time, self-focused mindset. He
Hmm.
was only thinking about himself and what he was trying to accomplish, and so he got in a real protective mode
Right.
and defensive mode in his work. But that increased awareness of how he was showing up and how that rubbed off on other people and what he was taking from other people in those relationships. He realized, man, like I have a lot that I can do to just show up differently. And he did. He sh started to show up differently. And even in the same role that previously wasn't going well, because he changed himself and how he was willing to contribute, connect with his teammates in a bigger way, contribute to projects in different ways, be open to new ideas that maybe he wasn't before, and a lot of other things that he did. He said, "Hey, I'm actually starting to enjoy this place. Like maybe I want to stick around. Like this is good." His performance improved, and just like that satisfaction. The environment didn't change, he changed, right? And that's not always possible. Like sometimes the environment is legit not great, but sometimes, you know, I talk with people a lot where say, hey, sometimes we think that, oh, I just got to get to a different situation or circumstance, like the grass is greener on the other side kind of mentality. Like, okay, it might be green for now, but like it's only going to stay green if you're the kind of person who waters and takes care of grass,
Yeah.
right? So
I love
we
it.
need to be those people. So there's even if we do decide that an environmental change is necessary, we still need to change and be the right sort of people to keep that environment the right kind of environment, even if we do need to make a shift there.
What I love about talking with other coaches is they start to realize the things that you can do to improve, even if you're a coach as well,
Oh, totally. I
right?
love it. Yeah,
It is
I'm
pretty
with you.
funny. As you were explaining that, I thought some situation like, dadgummit, that was me. What was that saying from Pogo? We have seen the enemy, and the enemy is us.
Yeah, right.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
And always learning new stuff all the time. I mean, we're talking about happiness here. Just I think yesterday I caught a YouTube video by Arthur Brooks, if you're familiar with him.
I've heard the
Written a
name.
number of books, right? And his latest one, I didn't know this until yesterday. He wrote is called The Happiness Files. Dr. Arthur C. Brooks, he teaches at Harvard, among other things, and he teaches a class on happiness in the business school at Harvard. Okay, so
Wow.
why does Harvard have a business class on happiness?
Yes.
Well, because they're in the business of building themselves and to be the right kind of leaders for the world. And he's done all sorts of research on this, and he found four key things that the happiest people focus on: faith, family, friends, and work.
Hmm.
Okay. You got those four things, and faith doesn't need to be a particular religion or faith tradition, but it needs to be something that's bigger than you, that transcends you, makes you feel small, which mostly protects us from narcissism. Okay. And keeps us humble, right? Family, yeah, like marriage and kids are a good source of happiness
Yes.
for most people. And he's like, more babies, please. Um, Friends, like, and I thought this was an interesting distinction. He talks about the difference between deal friends and real friends.
Oh, I
Deal,
like
f-
that.
deal friends are friends that are useful to you.
Yeah.
Real friends are useless to you, but they're great friends nonetheless.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
And then in work, which is the fourth thing that we've been talking a lot about today, he said two things that you really need to have fulfillment at work and happiness in a workplace setting is one, you need to earn your success, which I would take back to some of the things we were talking about around taking responsibility and having that
Mhm.
opportunity to really contribute in a meaningful way. And then two is to serve others in that capacity, which, yeah, like, we could talk about the principles of servant leadership and leaders, from a servant mentality rather than an overlord capacity.
Yeah.
But even everyone else, like, hey, how I show up as a fellow employee, or even the clients that I'm serving or others, like in a service mentality that's not just
Yeah.
about me, again, protects against narcissism and like doing work also that like we feel like there's a purpose for it beyond
Yeah.
ourselves as well. It matters. So I thought that was really cool, and obviously I think some work that I'm going to dive into. I've read a number of his books, but I haven't read this latest one I want to get to, and probably something that you jive with as well, I
I
imagine.
am definitely going to be reading that. There was another book. Oh, good grief, Adam Grant, right?
Yeah,
The give and
love his
take.
stuff.
I
Yeah,
love his stuff. Love his stuff, but
yeah,
it kind of coincides in a little bit of that of you can't always there has to be a balance between that give and take. And
absolutely.
oftentimes I've blurred the lines between that. And a lot of folks that I know that I've consulted with have blurred the lines and it's kind of pulling them back to do that. But man, I love those. I love those four different things because they're so simple.
Yeah.
And really it gives us a good measurement of what we should be striving to act from again
Hmm.
versus working instead of always going toward. It's just
Yeah,
yeah. Man,
yeah.
this has been enlightening and I have a feeling we're going to be talking some more in the future because you
I
have
love it.
uh you have a lot of great things I want to go into because you've seen so many good things.
Mhm.
So I would hope that you would consider that.
Yeah, I would love to talk some more. Absolutely. Yeah, this
Perfect.
is this is great. I love talking about this stuff. If we can show up and be the sort of people who, as coaches and facilitators, we're trying to make our own little dents in the world by the people that we touch and help and support, and the leaders and the ripple effect that can have. But every individual, like wherever we are, and the people that are around us as parents and siblings and neighbors and friends, like what we do matters. And if we can all connect back to that and say, hey, how can we find ways to serve and support people, it's usually going to get us in a better spot too. So, but also like, hey, we're all dealing with stuff. Every single one of us, uh, is, deep feelings of disappointment and fear and shame and inadequacy and everything else. And I have had moments of breakdown where I have needed people in my corner,
Yeah.
and had some of those real friends, not just deal friends, who like they don't need anything from me,
Yes.
but they're there to support me and love me no matter what. And I know. and feel that love from them. So I'm willing to share like the deepest and hardest things that I'm dealing with, and they love me in spite of, and maybe even more because they feel like they really know me. So I feel known, and they're seeing me, and I feel supported. And that is one of the most beautiful human experiences that
Yes.
I think that we can have. Is have someone like really know like everything about you, and they still love you anyway. I think that's a beautiful thing.